Hey Trekkies, it's summer, and you know what that means. It's time for Creation Entertainment's Trek to Las Vegas 2025. This year, the convention has been expanded to a 5-day schedule, August 6th through the 10th at the Rio Las Vegas Hotel. Meet all your favorite Star Trek pros in one place, and hey, maybe you swing by Vic's Lounge and you see our panel. It's a great way to meet people in person and have some fun with your fellow Trekkies. If you can't make it to Star Trek Las Vegas, of course, there's also other events around the country this year. Trek to Orlando, August 23rd through 24th. There's the Trek to New Jersey, September 6th and 7th. And finally, the Trek to Chicago, November 22nd and 23rd. We're looking forward to meeting as many of you as we can this year. So make sure that you get ready to trek to Las Vegas.
This is Kirsten Beyer, and you're listening to Open Pike Night, the podcast equivalent of a first draft.
Is this thing on? Hello, hello. Welcome to Open Pike Night, the Strange New Worlds podcast where your calls are the prime directive. I'm your host, John T. Bolds, here tonight with our amazing guests and our wonderful callers on stage. To help us welcome the woman who has literally written so many of the books when it comes to Star Trek. But first, let me introduce my co-hosts. The man who knows exactly who he is, but will still ask the computer what his role is in moments of doubt, Jesse Bailey.
My name is Jesse Bailey. I watch the Star Trek.
And the man who's had a pretty rough forgetting, so he always appreciates our listener calls to remind him of his purpose. Host of Green Shirt, a newbie's Trek through the next generation, Cameron.
Hey guys, what are we doing? What's going on?
Just check your arm tattoo, remember?
Oh.
And tonight we have a fantastic guest on stage. I am just going to read off her credits because they are so amazing. Consulting producer, co-producer, staff writer on Star Trek Discovery. Wrote a Star Trek short trek. Co-creator and executive producer of Star Trek Picard. Co-executive producer and writer on Star Trek Strange New Worlds. That is just the TV side of new Star Trek. She's also written numerous novels, books, like I said, all kinds of stuff. And man, how many of our previous guests have said Kirsten is the one who answers the questions? Like it is amazing how many times we've heard your name. And so we're psyched to have you here on Open Pike Night. Please welcome Kirsten Beyer.
Hello, fellas. It's really great to be here.
It's great to finally have you on. Like John said, we've heard your name bandied about so much. It's time.
There is one more credit you should add to that list.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, co-executive producer, Starfleet Academy.
Ooh, excellent. I was going off Wikipedia, so it doesn't have future projects on there.
Yeah, it doesn't have that. Yeah. Yeah.
We just found out today that Oded Fair will be back as Admiral Vance for Academy. Tilly will be there, Mary Wiseman, and big surprise, Robert Picardo as the Doctor.
Yes, indeed.
Very
I
cool.
have goosebumps.
Yes, indeed.
I'm excited.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, we're going to go back in time a little bit before all those credits. And actually, to return to your Wikipedia page, very early on, it says, and I quote, "Little is known of Beyer's career prior to her involvement with the Star Trek franchise." Now, Kirsten, I'm not saying you're a vampire or a lanthanite, but if you were a vampire or a lanthanite, your Wikipedia would definitely say something along those lines.
Isn't it easier to just assume I was in jail or something? I mean, I love that we go straight to the supernatural, but well, so the thing is, I started out in this life thinking I was going to be an actor.
Okay.
And before that, I thought I was actually going to be a dancer. And what I realized when I was in my mid-20s, after I got out of graduate schools, I got a Master of Fine Arts in Acting from UCLA.
Okay.
Wow.
Was that writing was, in many ways more satisfying, if not equally satisfying, as performing, because at the end of the day, all this stuff is really just storytelling, right? We're using different parts of ourselves to do it, But the thing that was sort of central to who I am and how I process my life and how I enter the universe is just telling stories. So it was a very natural transition to writing. And then it took a long time, before somebody would agree to pay me to do it. So, which is, unusual, obviously. But yeah, I hung in there.
Have you had a chance to geek out about Dancing with Gates McFadden?
Have I had a chance? No. Did I what?
I mean, she's a dancer. That's her
yes,
background
no, but
too.
I was not on set for any of that, so I did not. I have never met Gates.
Oh, that's too bad.
They keep me locked away, doing many, many, many things, and
well, you are
the
a
last
vampire,
time I was on set for and the nighttime thing, that's difficult. But I think the last time I was on set for Picard was season 1.
Mm.
Oh
so,
wow.
Yeah. Well, because we were doing Strange New Worlds season 1 at the same time we were doing season 2, and then there was COVID.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was all just, Yeah.
You've been busy. Yeah.
It's been a lot, fellas. It's been a lot. I think it's like 13 seasons of television in the last 8 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's impressive. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, how did you get the acting bug or the dancing bug, whichever came first? How'd you get into that?
Well, the dancing thing was my parents' fault. They put me in dance classes, and I loved it. I mean, I started when I was like 2. And then when I got into high school, I sort of realized that my body was changing, and I really no longer was going to look like a classical ballerina. So I sort of transitioned to acting and never looked back. Although I, continued doing musicals and things like that. And the dance training was awesome. But yeah, acting was more fun.
Mm-hmm.
So I continued that all the way through high school and college, and then went straight into graduate school. My undergraduate degrees were English literature and theater arts, and then the master's was in acting. And then I got out of school and got married. And a few months later, my husband had the nerve to get cast in a play that I was not cast in. So I found myself, at home alone at night with nothing to do, right around the time Star Trek Voyager premiered on television. And Voyager was actually the very first Trek show that I ever watched on television as it aired from beginning to end. I knew the original series really well because my brother and I watched, reruns of it growing up. And I'd caught a bunch of Next Generation. I had seen hardly any Deep Space Nine at that point. But yeah, Voyager was the first full series I ever watched all the way through.
That's cool. We don't actually talk to a lot of people who Voyager is their first one.
And I really did fall in love with it,
Yeah, that is something we did hear.
Probably don't talk to a lot of people who say that either.
Well, they were McDonald's favorite, right? That was her home track.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm glad you mentioned Erin McDonald, because I do have a question about something she confessed later on. So we'll.
Later on. Oh, okay. I'm gonna wait. Okay, all right.
I'm sure we'll get more into the Voyager of it all shortly too. But should we play Zoe's clip?
Yeah, let's start with Zoe. Here is our good friend Zoe from the Back Look Cinema podcast.
Open Pike Night. This is USS Cinema. Do you read? Can you close the city a little bit?
Working on it, Captain. Can you read me? Sorry, this is the USS Cinema. This is Zoe Richardson, Captain Commanding, also host of Backlook Cinema, the podcast. We've been shunted into some kind of pocket dimension using our experimental warp drive as something went awry. Don't know exactly what's going on, but here we are. I got my engineers and scientists working on it, trying to get us out of here. In the meantime, I'm just twiddling my thumbs. However, I have heard that you have the amazing Kirsten Beyer on your show. Now, I know, Kirsten, that you are basically living the dream right now, writing for one of the greatest sci-fi franchises that ever was. But are there others that you might be interested in reviving? We've seen successful revivals of shows like Lost in Space or Battlestar Galactica. I'm kind of vying for shows like Buck Rogers or Flash Gordon or even Space 1999. Those look like they're ripe for revival. Are there things in the ancient archives that you are interested in kind of reviving? Let us know. Hopefully you'll get this transmission. Richardson out.
Transmission received, Richardson.
The Zoe lore is getting very deep.
Yeah, I think that's the first
Yeah.
one with
Is it?
multiple characters in it.
Is
That
it?
was good. I like that.
Wow. Are there things I would like to reboot classic sci-fi wise? I don't know. I'm going to say, well, look, I would have said Battlestar Galactica if it hadn't already breathtakingly, brilliantly been done, right? That was an awesome one. My friend Dayton Ward would be all over the Space 1999 of it all. I remember that show as well. Yeah, I can see that being super cool. I got to tell you though, like when I think about writing other things, I'm way more interested in the worlds and the universes that I'm building in my own mind. There's a piece I've been working on for a couple of years now that is coming into shape that began in my mind as a Star Trek story, but I realized very quickly it didn't have to be. So that's out there. And then the other thing that I draw a lot of inspiration from, quite frankly, is history and historical fiction. That's what I'm reading when I have time, which is sadly never these days. But there are a lot of stories from our history that I very much would like to tell, to find modern ways to tell, because there's some extraordinary stuff that has happened in the past.
I like that.
Yeah, and that's the second writer in a row that we've spoken with who said there is room for a new big sci-fi franchise. And I really hope that we get to see that someday.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and Zoe was really brave to bring up, like Lost in Space. Like they did a fantastic job with that. Matt LeBlanc was badass in that.
Wait.
I was going to make a Sequest joke or reference,
nice.
but I think the Lost in Space is the better.
Here is our friend Melanie from Germany.
Hi guys, and hello Kirsten. Here's Melanie calling in again. I start right off with the question. How do you pronounce your name? Kirsten or Kirsten? It's quite a common name in my home country, which is Germany. So do you have German relatives? Just wondering. Anyway, it's great of you to drop by. You wrote Among the Lotus Eaters, which is a favorite episode of mine. I admit I'm a big fan of Anson Mount, and I enjoy every chance he gets to have some badass action scenes in a great episode. So I loved this one. I liked how you did the memory loss and everyone's personalities and expertise shone through. And here are some more questions for you. I hope you don't mind. What's it like to write for Star Trek? Have you been a fan before writing for the franchise? How does it feel to develop the characters further? Do you have any advice for hobby writers? Have you ever experienced writer's block? And again, do you have any advice on how to tackle it? And now the last one. What software do you use for writing? That's it for now. Thanks for being on the show, and take care. Live long and prosper.
Wow, Melanie. Well, so first off, I pronounce it Kirsten, you're with a K.
Okay.
And I believe on my father's side, the relatives are from Poland and Bavaria. So I think actually on my mother's side, there's some German, but my mother's primary is Italian. She was Pellegrino. And I think it was my grandfather who actually came over from Italy. So, well, the software one's easy. I use Microsoft Word for my novels, and I use Final Draft for the scripts because that's standard for our shows. Any advice for hobby writers? I mean, I think the best advice, well, there's two things. The first one is a very common piece of writing advice. I think it was probably made famous by Anne Lamott, which is never be afraid to write a shitty first draft. Writing is rewriting. Oftentimes, the desire to make it perfect can get in the way of getting it done. So give yourself permission to let the first version suck and know that you're going to be able to make it better as you go along. But you need to have something to work with. In terms of writer's block, it's just not something I've ever really had. I was going to say the luxury to have. Deadlines are real things, and they are tough. And part of being a professional is making sure that you hit them.
Yeah.
One of the best early strategies is kind of choosing the same time to write in any given day, if that's possible. For me, that used to be the end of the work day. I would sit down and take my last few hours of the night to write. And just the process of doing that every single night sort of gets your brain into the place where it knows what's expected of it and what you're going to do. If I sort of find myself not knowing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing at any given moment, I just try something. Literally try anything and see where it takes you. And in that way, oftentimes I found unexpected things that were pretty awesome. So yeah, I hope you find some of that helpful.
That's fantastic. And I won't make you wait for the question referencing Erin McDonald. It was Dr. Erin, right, who admitted she had some anonymous AO3 accounts out there. And do you have any completely anonymous stories out there floating in the ether that just you had to get out and let people read without them knowing it was you?
I don't have a story out there. I have one piece that I wrote after the Dobbs decision came down because I absolutely had to get it out. And it is out there, but there's very, very few people who know about it.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
That's a worthy one.
Yeah. We're going to get into Star Trek. We're a Star Trek podcast and you are a Star Trek writer.
Let's do it.
So usually our first question is, what's your home Trek? And you've already told us it's Voyager, but like I said, we don't get to hear a lot about that. So give us the pitch. Tell us what it's like having Voyager be the Trek that got you to be the Trek person you are.
When I started watching Voyager, this thing happened that had literally never happened to me before, which is that 5 or 6 episodes into the first season, I had an idea for a story I wanted to tell. And I'd never written anything before. I mean, short things for like whatever, but I'd never really tried to write anything script-wise before that moment. And I had this idea and I told my husband about it. And he was like, well, what are you going to do? Write it? And I was like, yes, I think I will. So from that point on, I was watching Voyager, but I was also kind of studying it in a very, very basic way. I sort of taught myself how to write television, particularly Star Trek for television, by watching and studying Voyager. How did it work? What's a scene? What's the length of a thing? How many people are in this? What's the whole thing? And so like it became kind of like irrevocably intertwined with my brain creatively from the very beginning, to the point where so often throughout the series, I would have an idea for something and it would show up within a week or two, which I used to think, okay, are they reading my diary? Like what's happening here? But I sort of realized ultimately that all that meant was that I was actually very in sync with what they were doing. This happens to a lot of people who write fan fiction, a lot of people who are trying to develop stuff around shows like this. And it's actually a good sign. It means you're actually on track with what they're trying to do. The love of it was very much not just like an emotional reaction to it, as much of a deep dive into the craft of it. And then, of course, by season 4, I was actually, so at that time, when I first had this crazy idea, Star Trek had this open submission policy. You guys have probably heard of this, right? Where unrepresented, unsolicited writers could send in a script, actually 2. And as long as you signed a legal release, they would read it. So I wrote my very first episode of Voyager, signed that release and sent it off. And it came back. And then I did a second one and it came back. And what I didn't realize at the time was that the point of those scripts was not actually to sell a story. Like, I can probably count on 1 or 2 hands the number of people who ever sold an episode of Star Trek that way on any of the shows. The point was to get pitch meetings. And I didn't know what those were at the time, so I didn't get it. But I kept writing after that. I mean, at that point, the writing bug was just there. So I was like, I did a adaptation of my favorite novel. I did my very first television pilot. I did another feature. And, like around season 4, there was an episode of Voyager that came on that was so bad, it made me angry. So I ended up writing a very snotty letter to Jerry Taylor, who was the executive producer at the time, telling her all of the reasons why I was supposed to be writing for her. And she wrote me back and said, well, great, come in and pitch. Wow. And I was like, great, what's that? So then I had to figure out what that was. And this is the early days of the interwebs. And what was awesome was at that time, there were actually folks who had a lot of these meetings and had taken the trouble to go online and publish accounts of like what those pitch meetings were and what they talked about and how it all worked.
Nice.
So I studied all that, and I talked to every friend I knew who, knew anything about anything. And I put together my first set of stories, and I took them to Paramount. And the first person I ever pitched to was a very patient, very kind, very enthusiastic Brian Fuller.
Wow.
And that began my sort of professional journey on that side of Voyager. I ended up going back 4 or 5 times. And by the last time I pitched to him, which was in the early part of the last season, he was like, "We have to get you on the writing staff." And I was like, "Well, that'd be great." Didn't happen then, but it did happen about 15 years later. So
you didn't get on the writing staff for that, but you did start writing a bunch of novels for Voyager.
I did, yeah.
And it's very well documented. Can you give us a quick version for our listeners who aren't familiar with your journey through continuing the Voyager story?
You mean how I got the job?
Yeah.
I had become very good friends online with a woman named Heather Jarman, and we talked Star Trek all the time. And she was invited based on a website that she had created. I think it was called Confessions of a Voyager Virgin, where she would do these sort of very thoughtful essays about the show and what they were trying to do and what have you. So she was invited by the editors over at Pocket to do a Deep Space Nine novel, which meant I had to watch every single episode of Deep Space Nine if I was going to help her tell that story, which I did and was extremely grateful for, because at that moment I realized, well, Deep Space Nine may be the best thing Star Trek ever did. So that was a joy to discover in that way. And once she had that contract and was doing that work, she was kind enough to introduce me to the folks at Pocket who were doing the Voyager novels. And it got off to a shaky start, but eventually I met Marco Palmieri, who was taking over the editing of Voyager at a shore leave convention. And he asked to read my work, and then he called me and offered me a novel and a short story on the same day. And that was the first day that I was ever told I was going to be paid to write anything. So that was a really good day.
Nice.
I did 2 pieces this was all around Voyager's 10th anniversary. My very first novel, Fusion, and the short story Isabeau's Shirt for the anthology collection that they did. And then I went off and I cheated. I wrote for Alias and I wrote for Buffy. And then they brought me back in to start to redo the Voyager relaunch. There had been 4 books that started the series, and then this sort of massive upheaval in the literature world. A project called Destiny by David Mack, a trilogy that was a massive crossover event, but also in so many ways changed the nature of Star Trek books. Kind of forever was happening. And so I was brought in while that work was still in progress and started consulting with Mack and 4 or 5 other writers who were all like working for their respective series around Destiny and figuring out how we were going to move forward after that. So my first Voyager relaunch book, Full Circle, was very much born of that Destiny story and the collaboration around it, which was exciting. I mean, for those, I guess it was 10 or 12 years, it was literally the most exciting time to be writing Star Trek books that I can imagine, because we all were sort of like this weird extended writer's room. We were always talking and helping each other and, figuring out cool things that we could do and making sure it wouldn't screw up what anybody else was trying to do. I don't know. We were just trying to do something quite different. These were no longer just, hey, here's an episode you might have missed. You know what I mean? Which is what a lot of the older books, amazing as they are, felt like. We were trying to sort of hold this whole massive universe together with our bare hands. And there was no other Star Trek, at the time, other than probably comics and stuff like that. But there was no TV. The films didn't start back up until 2009. So it was us. And it was awesome,
I really like the sort of running theme in your Star Trek writing career of kind of creating your own space. Like you decided, this is what I want. I'm going to make this happen. And then you do it. It's very, very cool.
It's extremely inspirational. I hope our listeners are excited to know that we're getting you on the show. And here's another great caller. We have Michelle.
Hey, Open Pike Night. First, a big thank you to Kirsten Beyer for all of her awesome contributions to the Star Trek fandom, from the novels featuring Captain, now Admiral, Catherine Janeway, to your contributions to the Star Trek series that are currently on or have just ended. I am so grateful to have your voice in the on-screen mix, and I'm wondering what that journey was like, because I love that we have more women involved in the creative end, in the writing end of Star Trek, as well as on screen. And I'm just wondering what that journey was like. And if there is a difference between writing novels and writing for television or film. So if you wanted to share anything about that, I'd love to hear it. Also wanted to say I adored your short trek, Children of Mars. It just gripped me wide away. It was such great storytelling. Do you think that we're going to get more short treks in the future? Because I would love them. Finally, I would love to get your thoughts on what Prodigy has done with Admiral Janeway. Did you see it yet? I was super excited. Spoilers for Prodigy, because I always make a Crusher connection here on Open Pike Night. We did actually get our first scene on screen between Catherine Janeway and my personal favorite character, Dr. Beverly Crusher, who also sat in the captain's chair. So I would love to see more of that. Love to see what you think of where Janeway went and where Prodigy went in season 2. And also, what are you up to next in Star Trek? Thanks so much for coming on and answering fans' questions. Live long and prosper.
Wow. Oh my God. Well, I just got to tell you, just hearing that kind of enthusiasm is really, really amazing and heartwarming. And I appreciate it so very much. Like, that's incredible. There is a huge difference between writing novels versus writing television. And when I started in my very first writer's room on Discovery, I had no idea what that difference was. And the process of learning how to break stories for television, which you do long before you actually get to start writing them, hurt my brain a lot at the very, very beginning, because I couldn't see then all of the things that were affecting the choices that people were making. I was just sort of seeing the choices and then being like, well, why would we do that? But there were certain phrases that sort of kept coming up over and over in the room that I started to realize were super important. Things like, let it suck for a minute, which is sort of the code for, yes, I don't care if in episode 19 of season 3 of whatever somebody said this, like, the idea is what's important, and let's get at what dramatically we're trying to do before we just say, no, you can't do that, right? So that's part of it. And the other piece of it, though, is that especially in Discovery, which was the first one, we were very consciously looking at a serialized format, right? So, and most of the other writers in the room were used to holding one episode or two worth of story kind of in their head at the same time. Maybe 3, like What Came Before, Where You Are Now, and Where You Think You're Going. But if you're going to do a 10, 12, 13, 15 episode story, like, for me, you got to know the end. Like, you got to know where you're going, which is not to say that in the writing of my novels, it always worked out exactly the way I thought it was going to. As the further I got into it, the more I felt free to make changes on the fly that I felt were going to work better. But at least I had a target I knew I was going to hit, right? And for television, these guys were like, nah, if we can find, 3 or 4 ways that we think we could solve this thing that we're about to leave hanging, we'll call it good and we'll go for it. And that just scared the hell out of me. That was like flying without a net, But that was the way they did it, and that was the way they saw it. Whereas for me, I was always trying to hold the whole thing in my head. It was a difficult, tough transition. I was supported by very, very talented, very, very smart, and for the most part, very patient people in those early years. And I think the reason they were so good to me, or one of the reasons, is that there was a ton of value I was adding for them on the other side, in the sense that, these are people who didn't know what a warp drive was, let alone how it worked. They didn't know, they didn't see the whole of the Star Trek universe as this massive sort of living thing. They couldn't understand how a simple choice that they thought would mean nothing would actually ripple out and affect 15 different episodes. That for whatever reason, well, I know why, they all just live in my brain. And all of that just simply has to do with having written novels for 15 years. Like, my editors were hardcore about the canon and about not breaking anything. Right. So I was just trained to see how everything that I was doing could. And if I didn't know it, or somebody brought something up to me, I'd have to go back and rewatch it and look it up. So I've seen all of these episodes so many times now, and my brain is kind of freakish and weird, and things just sort of stick there. So even if I don't off the top of my head know something, I know where to go find the answer to a question that somebody might have. And all of that was so additive to not have to be in the room and have a question and be like, well, somebody will go look that up and we'll talk about it again tomorrow. For me to be able to just sit there in the moment and in the flow and be like, oh no, this is this and that is that, and here's what you're trying to do, meant a lot. So it was very difficult at first. It has thankfully gotten much easier over time to the point where now it feels like second nature, and I love it. I wonder what it would be like to go back and try to write a novel now. Like, like that would be pretty tough, I think. As far as the short trek goes, I mean, that piece is very, very important to me too, and I'm really glad that you enjoyed it. For me, I think the thing I still long for in Trek more than anything is to explore different narrative points of view. I understand the comfort zone of the captain and the first officer and the engineer and the pilot and doctor. But for me, the universe of Star Trek is a massive real place where there are civilians who have nothing to do with Star Trek, who are just living their lives. But what does it mean to have been raised in this place where there is no, I mean, setting the money issue of it aside, which gets complicated, being raised with no want or need or disease or poverty, or getting to get up every morning and just figure out what you want to do based on what you're excited about. You know, and I imagine for some people that is still going to be playing video games all day. Like, I get that. But I just think it would so fundamentally change who we are as people. And those are the kinds of stories that more and more I start to gravitate to. So I was super excited when I pitched the idea for Children of Mars, and Alex was immediately like, oh yes, we're doing this. Absolutely. Like that was pretty exciting. And I love how it turned out. Like
it's so good.
That was very, very cool.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm going to out myself now as a very bad Star Trek fan at the moment. You would be amazed at how little Star Trek I get to watch anymore because the hours in the day simply do not exist. So I have only seen the first half of the first season, and I cannot speak intelligently yet to what they did in the rest of season 1 or in season 2 with Janeway. But I'm excited to see it at some point. I mean, I'm sure I will get to it. I haven't yet. So sadly, I can't opine on any of that for you, Michelle. I'm sorry.
I understand having 2 Star Trek podcasts. I don't have time to watch anything but Star Trek.
Yeah.
It's like, I'll get to the boys. David Reed, I'm sorry. I'll get to the boys eventually. I promise.
Yeah.
As will I. I mean, Jesus.
That's good.
It's on the list.
Yeah. You've talked about writing for TV and writing for novels, and the novels followed, a series that was already over with something like the Illyrian Enigma, where you have to write a parallel story. How is the approach different to that, knowing like there've got to be constraints? They're like, no, you can't kill a main character. No, you can't have any major, series affecting plot points happen in this, like, to a certain extent. What is that process like?
Well, so that's always the joy and the terror of tie-in writing, period, right? What you're looking for is a very, very small piece of a puzzle that is missing. Your job, once you find that piece, is to actually go as deep as you can into the people who are experiencing whatever the thing is, rather than trying to add a lot of like plot and history around it, right? These are always ultimately stories of characters. And all of my work has always been extremely character driven. For something like that, it's very easy for me because I've been a part of all of the conversations in the room about all of these characters, and I know exactly what we're going to do with them. So I know where the red flags are and where the boundaries are. So it just sort of becomes a fun, almost game of, so how far out can we go without creating a situation where people who are reading the story will suddenly feel like, wait, I can't track what I'm reading with what I also know to be true. Because that's the quicksand, right, of all of this stuff. You need these tie-in stories to add value to the experience that the people who love the universe are already having. And so if you can find a cool way to open something up, to break it open that they've never thought of before, like that's the sweet spot. But even if you can't, as you're moving along, you need to make sure, or I hold myself to the standard of making sure that, even if you have to squint real hard, it's still not going to destroy something that you understood previously, right? Now, I don't have the power on the TV shows to always hold them to that standard, but that's my personal standard, right? But I will say, like, another thing that I have learned that came as a big surprise to me through the years is that there are times when, for the sake of a really, really good story, break the canon. You know what I mean? Like it can't be the thing that holds you back to the point where you can't do good work. It also doesn't mean that, you're like, whatever, none of this is real. It doesn't matter. Just do whatever the hell we want. It's not that either. There is a place in between where you understand the work you're trying to do. In particular, I'm thinking about like the season 2 Una episode with the with her whole Illyrian storyline. And we had been talking about her as an Illyrian, from the very beginning of season 1. And that's a course of concept that we had pulled from some of the beta canon. But there is this misconception that the people who live in the Star Trek universe are perfect. And oftentimes when we are trying to find stories that resonate with our current day, we are looking for imperfections. And the whole idea of the sort of racism against genetic engineering, which has become this recurring theme now in freaking everything I am writing these days, is an interesting one. But boy, was it a hard one to break without also feeling like we were breaking the universe,
When you're writing novels or comics, do you try to tell stories that are uniquely suited to those formats, to the print over screen, or do you just kind of tell the story you want to tell and let the format take over?
You have to conceive from the very beginning of a story, especially if you're talking about a novel that's going to be big enough, and if you're talking about a comic that's going to be small enough in some ways, right? Which is not to say that one is necessarily easier or harder or better or worse. They're just different forms. Poetry is a lot harder to write than prose because you've got a lot fewer words. You know what I mean? And the thing about the screenplays is that it's really a question in my mind constantly of what am I seeing, right? In a novel, I can go as deep as I want to into any character's mind, thought by thought, moment by moment, about how they are getting through or to the next idea. On screen, I don't get to do that, right? I have to write the words around those things that an actor is going to be able to inhabit. But also I just have to constantly be in my head running the episode, like I'm watching it, and make sure that what is on the page is enough of a guide for the people who will be putting all the various pieces together down the road to accurately, show what it is that I saw in my head, right? Because in a lot of ways, a script is a work order, right? It's a blueprint for a thing that doesn't exist anywhere except in my head when I'm writing it.
So,
which is weird.
Speaking of keeping things in your head, you had mentioned trying to keep like a whole serialized story in your head for Star Trek Discovery, which was kind of new for Star Trek outside of some chunks of Deep Space Nine. Is that in any way related to your credit on Discovery as executive story editor? I was recently rewatching season 2 and your name popped up as that. And I was like, well, that's gotta be a writing position. What does that mean?
So there is a long tradition in writing of just a very, very simple track of credits that you begin to move through as you become a professional writer and as you move through various jobs in the writer's room, right? The first position is staff writer, and then story editor, and then executive story editor, and then you move into assistant producers, co-producers, straight up producers, and then co-EPs and executives and all of that. Now, over the years, some new credits have sort of come and gone, depending on the show and what the person was doing, but the executive story editor credit was simply, so it was weird because I was a staff writer in season 1, and then I was going to be a story editor in season 2, right? Like outside my office on my door, I had one of those cute little signs that they always put up every year that is your name and your title. So it said Kirsten Beyer, story editor. But by the time we got to the end of season 2, I had already co-created Picard and was going to be working on that, which meant that I had to have a whole new deal put together. And as part of that deal, I was actually promoted to executive story editor for season 2. So I skipped a level between seasons 1 and season 2 of Discovery. So I never held the story editor job, but for a long time, I still had the sign from my door that referenced a thing that had never happened. But yeah, it's just simply it's just simply a new level. The work that I have done in these rooms, apart from taking on more responsibility in terms of the writing and beginning to mentor younger writers and things like that hasn't really changed since day one. It's, you're in the room as a writer, you're all wrestling with story, and then you're all taking your assigned episodes and trying to make them as great as you can.
Very illuminating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a big thing about Open Pike Night is we're learning a lot about the business and how it functions.
Well, I'm glad I can help.
Thank you.
We do have another call here from our good friend, Abby.
Hey, Open Pike and Kirsten. This is Abby from the First Flight podcast. Kirsten, since you have done such incredible work across so many shows on this franchise, my question for you is, what do you hope that your lasting impact, your legacy, your touch on the franchise will be? I mean, this could be something huge, something tiny, something silly, something nebulous. But since you have had your fingers in lots of different pieces of the pie, I'm wondering if there's something that you really hope sticks with people for the long term. I love your work. Thanks for all that all of you do, and we'll talk soon.
That is such an interesting question. And the thing that comes to mind is that it goes back to that thing I was talking about earlier in terms of narrative points of view. I would like to someday, and I feel in some ways we have, but even more so, take Star Trek to places it's never been before, and do it in a way that is extremely satisfying for the fans, which means it has to continue to resonate not only with the Star Trek that we all grew up loving, but also our present moment. The thing about Star Trek for me has a lot to do with the aspirational element of it, showing us at our best, or at what we imagine to be our best, but also like thing that they always skip is how did we get there? I don't know that I have the story completely of how we're going to get there, but I would like to be able to illuminate that a little bit more at some point in time. And she asked about being a woman on these shows. And what I started to immediately remember was the fact that in the very first Discovery room with Brian and the fellas, I was one of two women in that room. And the other woman, Gretchen, was, half of a writing team, Gretchen and Aaron. And they very quickly became showrunners. She was out of that room a lot. So in the early days, there were many, many days where I was the only woman in that room, and I felt it. Which is not to say that my fellow writers were insensitive to anything in particular, but all I can say is that I felt it. And then Gretchen and Aaron got busy hiring Bowie and Erica and Lisa Randolph, and lo and behold, near the end of season 1, which was the season that lasted forever. Like, I think we were doing that for 18 months or something. At the end of that season, a day came where everybody else was either on set or on script. And we were getting ready to break an episode. And I looked in the room and it was just me and Gretchen and Bowie and Erica and Lisa. And I said to myself, I would not be amazed if this is the first day in the history of Star Trek where an episode has begun to be broken only by women. And it was like such an amazing thing to be able to be a part of. I don't think much of it now. Most of the rooms that I have been in since have a really great and interesting balance of men and women and all kinds of different diverse voices. But yeah, at the very beginning, it was kind of me. And that was a load to carry,
Yeah.
How do you feel? We've noted on Strange New World specifically, there are many times when Pike is the only man on the bridge surrounded by women. I mean,
it's the ship of the Valkyries, isn't it?
It's amazing. I mean, having watched Star Trek from back in Voyager and before, do you feel that difference?
Oh, gosh, yes. But I also, in some ways, don't feel it makes a difference at all, which is the best part.
That's what all the actors have said who've asked that too. They're like, oh, yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
And I guess that's where we want to be, right?
Yeah. I mean, look, yeah, I will never be able to get out of my mind the moments in the original series where, Bones turns to Kirk and he's like, well, yeah, it's great now, but, she's just going to find some guy and marry him, and then you're going to be out a crew member. And I'm like, what the fuck? But that, that is all there. It is all a product of its time. right? And to be playing in that same time period, but looking at it through such a different lens is so joyful. So yeah, I mean, I notice it, but I also am like, yeah, that's the way it probably should be. So, like there's 900 hours of Star Trek, fellas. Like for whatever your thing is, I promise you it already exists and we're making more, So if for some reason that's going to be your hang up, I'm sorry, but there's plenty of Star Trek for you out there. Right.
Most of us,
Yeah.
I actually had a fella. This was before Discovery came out. This was before the first season aired. I was at a con in Vegas and we were signing comic books. The comic books were released a little bit before the show came out. And there was a gentleman who had clearly been waiting in line for a while, who, when he finally got to me, wanted to tell me in great detail all the reasons why Giorgio couldn't be a captain on the Shenzhou. This had been announced, but nobody had seen it. Because, according to the last episode of the original series, women couldn't be captains and blah, 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 blah. And I just looked at him and I was like, that's the hill you came to die on? Like, really? Like, I don't care.
Yeah.
Like, this is what I mean about canon can be a cage, right?
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I don't think so.
Reminds me of the Garrick meme. Weird hill to die on, but at least you're dead.
Yeah, I think that's right.
And I'm totally going to go watch that Q episode of Voyager now. Just hearing you say Ship of the Valkyries was like, okay, I gotta watch it. That's all there is to it.
Yeah.
Well, so how did you get involved in Strange Worlds? It sounds like they just put you on all the new shows. Is that how it's working now, or?
Akiva and I were doing Picard at the time, and it was COVID had happened, and I just remember I got a phone call from him, and he was like, "Okay, so Strange New World is happening. You're going to come into the room," and I'm like, "Okay, all right.
Man.
I guess we'll figure out how that will all work."
Excellent.
And it did. As he was writing the pilot, he did, reach out to me from time to time. I'm sort of when I first started, the first nickname they had for me was the Oracle.
It's a good nickname to have.
Yeah.
We've heard that.
I do want you to go into detail on this, because like we said, we've heard from a lot of people that it's like, oh yeah, Kirsten sets us straight or tells us if this is a thing that can or can't happen. And like, I would love to hear about that.
Yeah, well, in the early days, it was a lot of the most basic questions, and a lot of them were coming from Toronto, right, from the various productions departments as those got staffed up. Even people who were like hardcore Star Trek fans and knew a bunch realized that there is a difference between knowing the facts of things that happened in an episode and being able to extrapolate that into what should be happening now. Like what it would mean to change the color of a phaser fire, what the various ranks mean, what the various colors mean. Then like we were changing a bunch of stuff, and we had to be super thoughtful about what it all looked like, right? And how it affected things. So I was sort of the first and last phone call on a lot of sort of factual matters that needed to not just be like, if it was something they could answer from Memory Alpha, even though I was always like, Memory Alpha is amazing, you can't always believe it, so please don't. It's always more the questions of like, what does it mean if we do this? What does it mean to the whole like system of Starfleet and the Federation and like whatever? Like even introducing like the Vance character. In the books, I knew there was a CNC of Starfleet Command, but that had never really been presented, as a figure within Starfleet. There are so many things that we take for granted in terms of the way Starfleet is modeled on the American system, but there are a lot of critical ways in which it's different. And then thinking about the Federation as an entity. And this is so much of what I do. It's really about having a sense of, if somebody asks a question like, what is the role of the president of the Federation vis-a-vis Starfleet? These are the kinds of conversations that I'm having with folks, which is not to say this is what I would do, therefore do it. It's to say these are the kinds of, if you go this way, this is what it means. And if you go this way, this is what it means. So which story do you want to tell? So all of that was just sort of to say that whenever these shows are being developed, I haven't done hardly anything on the animated shows, but I have had conversations from time to time with Mike or with Dan and Kevin about very, very specific issues that will touch multiple series. And anytime that's going to happen, a lot of times people will ask me to weigh in just because I sort of have a sense of all of them. Whereas the guys can get real focused on whatever it is that they are specifically doing. And they can also get very protective of their toys, which is interesting. You know,
boys and their toys.
Yeah. So for Akiva to like call me and be like, "Hey, do you think we can have her on the bridge of the Enterprise at this time?" And for me to be like, "Yeah, but she probably needs to be a cadet." You know, and the whole thing of the final training year of the cadets in Starfleet Academy, like having like an internship on a ship. I mean, we made that shit up for Discovery for the Tilly character, right?
Oh, okay.
But it made sense to me that Starfleet Academy would do that in your final year. I mean, why wouldn't you put kids out there, you know, starting to experience the various departments and shadowing the folks who actually do the job, just for them to get a sense of what they might actually want to do with the rest of their careers. God, it's weird. I forgot I made that up, but I did.
So
there's your legacy right there.
Yeah.
Speaking of boys and their toys, David Reed gave us a little insight. He said, you know, some of us, we all have our home trek, and some of us will defend to the death why our choice should be like DS9, or why our choice should be like Voyager, you know, or it should pull from there. I have to know, is there anybody in any of the writers' rooms who's like that, but with Star Trek Enterprise?
I feel like my friend Kat, who works on Strange New Worlds, has a lot of love for Enterprise.
Very cool.
Especially because of the moment when Strange New Worlds is set. She will always be like, well, you know, this person's probably still alive. You know? Which is true, usually. Yeah. But she may be the only one. I will also say that in our rooms, often as not, half the people there have no particular expertise in Star Trek. Their expertise comes in other ways. And as much as I questioned that choice in the very earliest days of my work, I have come to realize that, you know, we as deep nerds can get very far up our own assholes very quickly. And if we want the stories that we are telling to be, you know, accessible to people who have never seen an episode before, and we do, it's often to have a perspective of somebody who doesn't know it inside out and who can sit there and go, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Can we possibly make that clearer? You know what I mean? It keeps us honest in an interesting way. I think ultimately it's a big value add. I am the exception, not the rule in the writers' rooms. Let's just put it that way.
That's fantastic.
You need both ends of the spectrum.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like that.
Well, also speaking of boys and their toys, here's Newman.
Newman.
Hi, Open Pike Night. Newman the Space Hippie here, recording very early in the morning. I am very excited to heap lots of praise upon this fantabulous writer for this marvelous episode, Among the Lotus Eaters. This episode hit at a very crucial time for me and my experience watching season 2. For me, it was at that time my favorite episode of season 2. It felt like we were getting back to some really great proper TOS energy. But also the emotional places that this episode goes to spoke to me so much. You know, when we as people have to deal with something really awful and next level, there is that temptation to shut down, to forget, to just push it away. And if we could just go to sleep and forget everything, maybe we would. But everything that has happened to you, good, bad, and everything in between, makes up the fabric of who you are. But the other thing I loved about this is how there are certain things, at least it feels like the episode is saying there are certain things about us that are core to who we are. Everything about this was just so fucking Star Trek, and I loved it. And I feel like season 2 went on to have so many big sweeps, like the musical episode, like the Lower Decks crossover episode. Like, we took some huge swings as the season progressed, and I worry that Among the Lotus Eaters gets forgotten a little bit. It's still one of my absolute favorite episodes of the season. So love to you, love to the whole Open Pike Night crew. Newman the Space Hippie, out.
Aww, what a sweet and kind thing to say. And you are not wrong. We took some huge swings in season 2. And I loved it. Freaking loved it. I mean, we had set the bar for ourselves actually pretty high with season 1. I felt.
Yeah.
And I started season 2 going, are we going to be able to top that? I mean, like, is this gonna? And we just blew right the hell past it. And I don't even need to know how we did it. We just put our heads down and worked our asses off and got where we got to. It's very, very nice to hear someone say it feels like Star Trek, because if I have a sort of overarching goal every time I approach this material, it is always that always underpins everything that I'm trying to do. I like to break form. I like to look at things from interesting new perspectives, but whatever it is that I'm doing at the end of the day, it sure needs to feel like Star Trek. And I hear that often enough about the episodes that I've been able to write, that I feel like I'm continuing to meet that standard, which is nice. The trick of that one had a lot to do with the character of Pike. He is such a good boy. And
this is where I was hoping you would go with this.
Finding moments where he was less than his best self is difficult, right? But it's also, like Newman was saying, every single experience we've had, all the good and the bad, makes us who we are. So getting to take him to a place where you are stripping away so many of the things that you might on the surface assume are his identity in order to reveal what is deepest and truest about him, it's just super fun. And then we spent, I don't know how many hours arguing about how the memory loss specifically would work. Because as much as we think we know about the brain, we're still just starting to scratch the surface of all of this stuff. And how memory works is as much of a theory as anything else. But the idea, when we came across the whole intrinsic and extrinsic formulation, right? Things that live in one part of your memory, tying your shoes, brushing, you're not going to forget how to do those things, but that you could forget literally every other experience you ever had, because that's stored in a part of your brain that you can no longer access. That was the key for us, because we did need them to be able to, speak the language and do math and perform certain kinds of functions, but we also needed for them to take away a bunch of stuff from them. And for me, finding a scientific theory or a scientific underpinning for that is crucial. Like, I really can't take the story forward unless I know in some way it's actually possible that this thing could happen, right? I mean, I don't know what the weird exotic particles are that are going to do it to us, and I don't give a shit about that stuff. I just need to know that in the structure of a human being or whatever alien we're talking about, that this feels like a realistic possibility. Otherwise, you're going to lose the audience, right?
Yeah.
You can't screw around with people like that.
So
yeah,
I have to ask specifically, because you're talking about how the memory loss works. We have the scene where Spock looks at his pad and he says, "I can't read this."
Yeah.
And a lot of folks went, well, why would he forget how to read if he, remembers all this other stuff? And I, as, a diehard Trekkie, and as somebody who was reminded by a good diehard Trekkie, our friend Sophia, who we met in Portland at Fan Expo, she said, well, Spock was dyslexic as a child.
That's correct.
So this was him unraveling that. Is that what you guys were pointing to with that?
Yeah. Also pointing to the intensity of the exposure to the particles in that moment. There was sort of a standard range of functionality that existed on the planet, but our ship was right up next to those fucking rocks where that ship was.
Okay.
So it was actually more dangerous for the people on the ship. They lost their memories faster once they were exposed, and they regressed further, was the idea. But yeah, the dyslexia as well plays into that. Yeah.
That's the kind of continuity you get from the Oracle.
Exactly.
So
I do just want to echo Newman, because I was just saying to someone on Twitter the other day that, yes, I think other episodes in season 2 took big swings with format, but I really do think Among the Lotus Eaters took some big swings with character. And yeah, what you did with Pike and Ortegas was all really great stuff. And just kind of going back to Rigel 7, what was your intention to do with the characters as it spoke to the whole season. Because I think a lot of people were like, oh, well, you don't need that episode for the season. But I mean, what it does with the characters is just, in my mind, so great.
Damn important.
That's really if you either have a choice to make up a mission in the past that went badly, or to use a mission in the past that we know of that went badly, right? And the upside of using the previous mission is that you actually have a lot of very cool visual references, and you have some sort of tantalizing facts about how those people live, and then you get to build the whole world around it, right? Using that as your sort of guide. And like at the end of the day, I think it's more powerful that we were able to tie it to a known fact about Pike's life, that he had led this disastrous mission, and then that the worst thing you could ever imagine as a captain happened to him, which is he left a guy behind. That is so counter to who he sees himself as, that it was going to be incredibly rich, territory for story. And then tying it as well to the point he was at in terms of his relationship with Batel. I got to write those scenes, and that was a lot of fun, but also just that is some of my most favorite work, right? Exploring these kinds of relationships that also don't get a lot of play in Star Trek. These deep, long-term, committed relationships with people who have very hard, complicated jobs, who aren't going to be able to live in any sort of traditional way where we see those relationships, but still are totally committed to each other and want to make this work. But the reality is that's got to be difficult, So finding the sort of things that would hold them together was fun to explore.
Yeah.
I really like that in a single episode, you managed to address, and I'm just going to say fix, 2 big points from the original pilot, right? You've got Pike thinking, well, maybe I don't even want to be a captain anymore because this Rigel 7 thing was tough. And he also has that disastrous line of, I'll never get used to a woman on the bridge. And it's like, no, this Pike is dating a woman who runs a bridge. Like, this is not 1968 anymore, right?
Yeah.
It's magic.
In that area, I give all credit to Henry Myers, who is our brilliant showrunner, co-showrunner, along with Akiva. If I've heard it once, I've heard it 1,000 times from him. With things like that, with issues like that, he's like, yeah, we're just not going to do that. We're just not going to, like we had a knockdown drag out in season 1 about making Chapel a doctor instead of a nurse. And there were people who were sort of like, well, of course she should be a doctor. Women can be, and I'm like, yeah, but nothing wrong with being a nurse. Being a nurse is an incredibly, profoundly cool job to have. So let's not denigrate that sort of like in reverse by somehow saying that this should be everybody's ultimate goal, right? It's guys, we think about this shit real deeply.
we appreciate it.
We talk about it we talk it all to death from as many ways as we can, so that hopefully the result will be something that works on a lot of different levels.
Okay, well then I'm going to consult the Oracle, and since you brought up Chapel, I have a question from Subspace Rhapsody. She says somebody is in sickbay for a splinter. How do you get a splinter on a starship? How's that happening? I gotta know.
Well, you must have seen all the knickknacks in folks' quarters, right?
There's a lot of knickknacks.
A lot of knickknacks.
Like I'm guessing it was from something that somebody picked up somewhere else, some piece of wood or like whatever. I wouldn't think. I mean, obviously it didn't happen like on a door or a deck or a console, but I think there's plenty of natural things. Also, like, I'm trying to remember. No, it's the Enterprise.
The little trophies from Risa are made of wood, right? The
Horgons,
but the Horgons.
I have one of those. It was given to me by Jonathan Frakes one day.
Oh,
we were shooting. Yeah, I know.
That's awesome.
It's sitting right here on my shelf right now.
Also a legacy there, right there.
Jeez.
My own headcanon is that it's Sam Kirk, because I'm like, who wouldn't just be able to pick out a splinter? Because it's a splinter. Why do you go to the ER for a splinter? It's Sam Kirk.
Yes, Sam Kirk.
It was clearly whichever ensign pulled firewood duty for Captain Pike's
Yeah, that's true.
in quarters fireplace.
I
There we
want to
go.
believe that that's like my fireplace at home where there's no real wood in it, but I don't know for sure.
Kirsten.
I know.
The
I'm
talk
sorry.
about knockdown,
I'm
drag
killing
out
your
fights.
dreams. I get it. I get it.
We have
Is the fire hologram or not is a open pike night long running
Oh, is it?
discussion.
Oh, yeah.
I think we ended up getting our answer, and it was definitely couched in. But hey, if you want it to be a hologram, sure.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I will tell you, this was Tunde and I had a knockdown drag out on Discovery season 3, episode 307, because we're in the mess hall that has been redone, and we're doing this very Vulcan ceremony, and he and the director really wanted torches, and I'm like, you're not doing open fucking flames on a starship. Like, what are we actually talking about here, fellas? And the ultimate resolution is there. We will see them appear as holograms, and then we will see them disappear, or as matter synthesized, I suppose we'll call it. But, whatever. Yeah, because they couldn't be real. You can't have open flames on a starship. Like, what are we talking?
So,
Am I killing someone's dream right now?
Pike's fireplace?
No.
Yeah, Jesse, you're killing Jesse's dream. Yes.
Sorry, Jesse.
I don't need it to be real fire. I need people to not worry about Pike's fireplace.
Yeah, if they're worrying about the fireplace, we are definitely not doing our job. So.
Well, I mean, I think my guess would be that mostly the nitpicks for things like that in Strange New Worlds probably come from having 10 episodes to watch for 2 years and then 20 episodes to watch for 2 years. Like I mean, as a Strange New Worlds podcast, it can be rough between seasons. It really can. But there's so much there. Like we still find things to talk about. We still find folks to talk to, and I'll just play this part of my role on this show right now and say thank you for the magic that you do, because Strange New Worlds rules.
Oh, thank you.
Absolutely.
I am inordinately fond of this one. I have lived through and felt and fully support and believe in the struggles that we have been through on Discovery and on Picard. But it was there is a feeling in working on Strange New Worlds that I'm home, and that we have found the sweet spot, and it's a delightful place to be.
It is a delightful place to be.
And it's and it's made by some of the most amazing people I've ever worked with, and to a man, they love it and they give their all to everything that we do. It's incredibly inspiring too, and they take such big risks. Like that's so rare. It's so rare that when you're talking about projects of this size with this kind of an investment, the tendency is to play it safe. And Henry walks into that room every day, as does Akiva, and it's like, no, it's not. How far can we go?
Akiva just today at Comic-Con indicated there may be work being done on a Strange New Worlds stage musical. So
I have heard that as well. I don't know anything more about it, but I'm in. I'll go see it.
Yeah. When you say big swings, you are not understating it.
No. I mean, and I knew that one was going to work because I had all of the songs that were recorded long before they did the final mixes and the final recordings of them in this little file on my phone. And I played them for my daughter, who at the time was 12. And for a good 3 or 4 months, it was all she wanted to listen to on the way to school every morning. She would grab my phone, put in Uhura's song, and then put in Christy's song, and we were off to the races. And then there was Chapel's song, and then sometimes it all it varied, but all she wanted to listen to was that music for 4 months straight. And I was like, yeah, we're gonna be fine then.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So we're talking about big swings. When we spoke with Akiva and Henry, we can't tell if this is 100% true or if it's part of the tell them how it works, but don't give them all the ingredients. But they were saying, at the start of the season, you'll make pitches for episodes. Everybody, they'll pick out the pitches they like. You break the stories and you go from there. But if a story idea gets discarded, they don't go back to that. I think they had mentioned wanting to involve Jason Isaacs, Captain Lorca, and they couldn't figure out a way to do it. So they said, okay, so we're not going to do that story. Are there any pitches for Strange New Worlds that didn't make it that you really wish had?
So here's what's tricky. It's not that they were lying to you when they said that, because it is true that when you really work an idea, for example, the how could we bring Lorca back, and you looked at it every different way and you go, yeah, it's probably not going to work. It does go away. But we have this board in the room filled with index cards of ideas that ultimately didn't make it into the mix of the top 10, but are still solid story possibilities. And that board grows every year, you know? I don't want to tell you about the one that
no spoilers,
I am most hardcore about, but I will say, and I guess this is so this will be one of those things. If the episode ever ends up happening, you will think back to this moment and you will remember and you will know this is what I'm talking about.
Okay.
And if the series ends and it never happens, you can ask me and I'll tell you. But
excellent.
But there is I have been inordinately preoccupied through much of my writing, and this goes back a good 15 years, with certain issues about our world today and who we are and how we have sort of segregated ourselves into these weird bubbles of information and fact and stuff. And I did a whole trilogy meant to explore that, and was very much hoping by the time I got to the end of it that I would find some answers. And I found a few, but not as many as I wanted. And so that preoccupation, it feels like it would be such a good episode, but we just haven't quite broken the right form for it yet, because a lot of times it's like there used to be this old rule. It was literally a Bible of information that they would send to aspiring novelists or, the people who would be submitting scripts to the shows. And, one of the things was, we do not involve ourselves in other people's civil wars. So creating a situation like this, where it actually has a lot of meaning for our characters, is the trick, because it feels very much like somebody else's problem, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, that's sort of the broad strokes of it.
You guys, I think that's our first ever conditional exclusive scoop. I like that a lot.
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
I'm just hoping we're going to get cited on Wikipedia earlier when people fill in what Kirsten was up to for Star Trek.
If we end up with a Memory Alpha page, we're there, guys.
I didn't exist. I was born
at
the age of 25.
Before we wrap up, we do have to ask. We are the official podcast of Mortagus. We are big fans of Ortegas. When you were writing Among the Lotus Eaters, were you aware you were writing the Ortegas episode of the first 20 episodes? Or
yes.
Where were you with her character? We do love the I fly the ship line. I need to show off my shirt for that.
Yes, I was aware and I was very excited. It's a funny thing, because like on Discovery, we made the very conscious choice, which in some ways I feel strongly about, is still a good idea, but I think over time kind of bit us in the ass, to not focus the show on the bridge crew, right?
Mm-hmm. Viewers definitely have their opinions on that.
Yeah.
We were going to have bridge crew that we were going to see all the time, who we were not going to go deeply into as characters. And I think, I'm not sure what Akiva's original intention might have been. I think once Melissa became Ortegas, it was inevitable that this character was going to have to be developed a lot more deeply. But I think, initially, it's like, we got to deal with Pike, we got to deal with Spock, we got to deal with Una, we got to deal with Lon, we got to deal with, Uhura. It's like there's no, it is an embarrassment of riches, the characters of this show, right? And so, but there's Melissa just taking every single moment that she has and making it gold, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I was Davey did a lot of the heavy lifting on the planet stuff, and I did the heavy lifting on the Ortegas storyline and the ship stuff. So
I was going to ask if you broke it up that way.
Yeah, we did. You don't always break it up that way, but in this case we did.
Makes sense.
And yeah, and that work for me has continued, in the sense that she is always a character now who, when we're talking about how we're going to continue to develop her. I'm very, very protective of.
Mm.
She's amazing. And that storyline was great to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
All right, guys. So Kirsten Beyer, official godmother of Open Pike Night. Is that
There you go.
Sounds like.
I'm comfortable with that.
Sure.
If you guys are.
God Oracle.
There you go.
Oracle?
Yeah.
We'll workshop this.
Does it come with a T-shirt?
You know what? Yes.
It absolutely can.
If you have, like, if your folks will send us a PO box or something, yes, it comes with a T-shirt and probably some.
We've sent Melissa some T-shirts.
Aw.
One question I always like to ask our writers: is there a favorite single line you've written in a book, a screenplay, an essay? A favorite line of yours that you've written, one that stands out.
Mm.
Can also be unpublished. We've had that as an answer as well.
Indeed.
Yeah. I mean, like the one that I'm thinking of, I don't want to misquote it because it's kind of long.
Yeah.
But do you want me to grab it?
Sure.
All right, hang on a second. Where are my copies of?
Season 4 scripts. No. I'm kidding.
Let's see here. It says, "Don't you die on me, Ortegas. Don't you dare." No.
Oh, you're not limiting it to because it's not actually in a towel.
No.
Oh, no.
literally,
Yeah.
Acts of,
Not that line.
no, it's not acts of contrition. Oh, are they back here? No. Oh, come on.
I'm picturing you on like a giant ladder scrolling through a library.
Yeah, just books
No.
flying over your
Ladders on
shoulder.
wheels.
Beauty and the
No.
Beast style, yeah.
No, I have a bookshelf back here because when you write books, they give you multiple copies
Mhm.
of the first editions.
This is probably the most concrete answer we've gotten to this question. I'm
on the edge of my seat.
very
now.
excited.
It's long, and I'm sorry about that. But
Oh,
here
no,
we
we're
go.
getting a
great.
reading here. This is
Yeah.
exciting.
This is a conversation between Janeway and Chakotay, who,
Okay.
if you have not read my books, I will spoil for you the fact that they end up finally entering into the relationship that many fans, while watching the show, wished that they had. So there's a moment in this book. This is the second to the last book of the series, where they're talking about the issue of getting married and what that means for their relationship. She says that she's afraid of the idea of marriage. And he says this. He says, "You and I have been together too long and seen too much to ever lie to each other about that. Set aside the reality that every long-term relationship that has ever been is subject to disagreements, tragedies, and unforeseeable events that can do great damage to its foundation. Forget the fact that all relationships live and die not by any single choice, but by the countless daily choices they contain. The myriad moments where kindness, patience, and understanding prevail over our most base drives of selfishness and self-preservation. The deepest personal betrayals bear within them the seeds of grace and forgiveness. I don't care if we ever marry. For me, nothing can change the fact that your happiness is indistinguishable from mine." That's it.
That's good.
That's a great
I'm
line.
gonna put that in a
Thank
card
you.
to my wife
Yeah.
for an anniversary or something. Wow.
Yeah.
That is amazing.
Fantastic.
I'm glad you liked it.
Does your husband read your books and go, "Why don't you talk to me like that?"
And you say
My
it's because of
husband
that
has-
play that you booked that I didn't.
Yeah.
Exactly right. I'm still holding that against him.
That's right.
No, my husband has the exquisite joy or horror. I'm not sure which sometimes, although he says he loves it, of listening to my writing before anybody else ever sees it or reads it. So for most of the things that I've written, I'll work for a few hours and then he'll come and sit with me and I'll read to him what I did and he'll tell me what he thinks. And there have been times when his reaction to something was so strong that it's been like, oh, I think I have miscalculated here and might need to course correct. So he's my first best audience.
That's great.
Yeah.
I love it.
Is there anything else you want the audience to hear before we close up the interview?
I think only that the work that you guys are doing is such an integral part of Star Trek and of this universe, and I hope you're aware of that. I mean, I'm sure it brings you joy to do it, because obviously this is a lot of fun. But it's very, very important. Star Trek exists the way it does and endures the way it does because of the passion of people like you. And I am very grateful for you.
Well, likewise.
Thank you.
Dang.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Kirsten, you've led on that you are working on season 3, which we're all excited about. We've seen the clip from Comic-Con this past weekend. But beyond Vulcans, can you give us one word that won't mean anything right now, but when we watch season 3, we'll go, Kirsten, that's what she was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It just has to be 2 words.
Okay.
So
okay.
it's called Chapel's Flowers.
All right.
Oh,
I like that.
Okay.
I don't know if we've ever had a possessive one yet. I like that.
Right? Yeah. But the character, or like a chapel? Oh, my gears are working.
No, it's just you wanted something to play with, so you can play with it.
Absolutely. That's exactly it. We're going to be wondering about that till the season comes out. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Good work. All right. Well, Kirsten Beyer, Open Pike Night is an open mic night themed podcast. And so we do ask all of our guests to tell us a joke at the end of their interview. Do you have a joke for us tonight?
I do. And I will give half the credit to Jonathan Frakes because this is actually one of the very first conversations that we ever had. The day that we met, he came up to me, and I'm going to modify it just a little bit. And he whispered in my ear, "Where does the captain pee in her ready room?"
Where does the captain
bathroom?
pee in her ready room?
Anywhere she wants. She's the captain.
Now, there's a mental image.
But you have to understand, like, the pressure of that moment, because, like, I had never met him.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Oh, you're the one who knows everything about Star Trek." And I'm thinking to myself, there is no universe in which I know more about Star Trek than you do. But all right. And then he asks me this question, and somehow that's the answer I came up with. And that's
I love that. You're like, is this a test?
Very nice.
All right.
Wow.
Thank you, Kirsten.
Kirsten, thank you for being here with us. This has been everything we hoped for and more in an interview with you. We really appreciate it.
I'm so glad. It's been a lot of fun, too. I appreciate you guys taking the time.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you once again to Kirsten Beyer, Ear with a K. Fantastic to have the Oracle here on Open Pike Night. And thank you to all of our callers and all of our patrons, especially our 25-minute set patrons, Pam, Steve, and Mark. You are amazing, all of you supporters. We are excited about speaking with Kirsten. We're excited about the new content that's been dropping with Comic-Con. And we loved hearing your voices. So, Jesse, if we want to hear people's voices and if they want their voices heard, how could they do that?
The easiest way to get on to Open Pike Night is to go to openpike.com. There you'll see a tab that says Join Us. You can add your voice to the show. You can record directly on the website, or you can send an MP3 attached to an email, whatever is easiest for you. And you can go to openpike.substack.com to get signed up for our free newsletter so that you will be among the first to know when we have a new guest scheduled to stop by the stage. And of course, you can follow us wherever you do your social media-ing at Open Pike.
And Cameron, where can people follow you and find you?
I just want to say that I'm glad that the Star Trek Oracle couldn't see into my soul and see that I didn't feel I was worthy enough and zapped me with her laser eyes. That was a Neverending Story reference for you all. You can get more deep cut references like that over on Green Shirt, a newbie's trek through TNG, where John and I and a couple others are watching currently the last season of TNG. It's pretty exciting over there, and dipping our toes into DS9 as well. At Green Shirt 87, Green Shirt, wherever you listen to your pods.
And before I let John continue, which I would love to do, I'm just going to have to implore you to go check out my recent appearance on the It's Got Star Trek podcast. It's no secret that I'm a big fan of those gents and what they do over there. And I recently joined them to discuss discoveries through the Valley of Shadows from season 2, which the astute among you will know is the Time Crystal episode. I could not help myself. They gave me my choice and I took it. So check that out right now, because it's available right now as you're listening to this. Stay in your podcast app, look up It's Got Star Trek, and listen to my appearance. I had a ton of fun with the guys. I hope to be back someday, but I fully understand if I'm not.
It's a fantastic episode. And Cam, have you guessed it on anything recently?
If you're feeling some tremors under your feet, that might be my appearance over on Movies for Days with Newman the Space Hippie, who you heard today. Me and he talked all things Tremors, one of my longtime favorite horror films, and his first time watching it.
Really?
We got deep into some graboid philosophy, so go check that out over at Movies for Days. I was excited when I heard that, and very spoiler alert, he loved it, and I was very glad to hear that.
I might have to watch that movie and then listen to that episode.
There you go.
Yes. Wait, you still haven't seen Tremors 2?
No, sir.
Also,
Tremors and Die Hard double feature coming up soon, folks.
Ooh. John McClane versus Graboids? Man.
Shit.
Well, it's been a long night, and we need to go send Kirsten Beyer our pitch for John McClane versus Graboids and see if we can get some of that Strange New Worlds magic on that story. So, be sure to clean up after yourselves. Be sure to tip your servers. You can go anywhere you want, but you can't stay here.